opportunity for our career. That is why we have ordered the Academy of Higher Education and Research by JSS University.
This is a particular specialized course if you are keenly interested in management as well as healthcare together.
One of the unique opportunities for students joining JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research for MBA program is successfully trained and getting placed in all the major healthcare organizations, not only in India but also in abroad.
Facility provided is both class-based and on-site based education.
Our seniors are posted in various hospitals around the globe.
Management studies of health systems takes care in producing MBA graduates who are specialized in hospital administration and health systems management, looking at JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research for their education, for their career and for their growth.
Good evening, everyone. Seeking the blessings of His Holiness Swamiji, I begin this webinar. Unprecedented times require exceptional strategies as they pose challenges which are unheard of. It is in this context we are organizing this webinar on COVID-19 challenges to health systems by Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, Adjunct Faculty, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research. First of all, I would like to welcome on board Dr. B. Suresh, who is a Pro-Chancellor and the initiator of many innovations in our university. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
I also welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surinder Singh, who has been inspiring us and leading us in all our unprecedented times. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
I also welcome Dr. B. Manjunatha, Registrar, who again is a pillar of strength for all our activities. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, madam.
I also welcome Dr. P.A. Kushalappa, Director Academic, who is our mentor and supporter and a source of strength for all of us. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Mamta.
I also welcome our Dean, Dr. Colonel M. Dayananda, who again is lending a lot of support in terms of academic and research activities and leading us from the Dean perspective. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mamta. Thank you.
And I have the pleasure of welcoming our important speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, who has been a former ambassador from the Government of India and also an adjunct faculty for our university. Welcome you, sir, and looking forward for the insightful webinar. And I also have the pleasure of welcoming the JSS University of JSS Academy officers, principals, heads of departments, faculty, and students from various departments across the university. And I also have the pleasure of welcoming our online MBA Hospital Administration students who have joined this webinar enthusiastically. So welcome and thank you once again for your support in the successful running of this program. We don't grow when things are easy. We grow when we face challenges. And challenges initiate innovations and the best of the solutions to the problems. So I welcome you all to this session on COVID-19 challenges to health systems, and over to Smita for the rest of the coordination.
Thank you so much, madam. Now I request Dr. Surinder Singh, Vice Chancellor, JSS AHER, to give the opening remarks for the webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Smita. Good evening to all. At the outset, I invoke the blessings of His Holiness Swamiji, the Honorable Chancellor, and submit my respects and pranams to his lotus feet. I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan ji, IFS and a former ambassador, who is the honorable speaker for today's webinar. I also, on my behalf, extend a very warm welcome to our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. B. Suresh, Dr. B. Manjunatha, the Registrar of JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Dr. Colonel Dayanand, Director of JSS Hospital and Dean Faculty of Management Studies, Dr. P. A. Kushalappa, Director Academics of our JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Dr. H.K. Mamta, Coordinator, Department of HSMS, and all the faculty and the participants who are online for today's webinar on COVID-19 and challenges to the health system, which I feel is very apt, keeping in view the present circumstances and the challenges which we have faced very recently and still has not waned away. They are still lingering, and how we have met these challenges and how needs to be done further. I think that will be the main issue to be discussed during this webinar. We are all aware that the current global pandemic of COVID-19 has necessitated a shift in public health strategy with a much more emphasis on understanding the causes as well as identifying the appropriate community-based behavior and educational programs to meet some challenges. The realization has dawned during this pandemic that such incidences or such pandemics can affect both the developed as well as the developing countries and including the lower middle income countries at the same time. And they pose a different health level challenges to the administrators worldwide across different countries, different economic strata. In a country like India, where urban and rural divide is evident, especially in healthcare sector, with regard to availability, accessibility, and affordability, it has become even more vital to address these issues on a war footing and have to have a strategy in place so that if such eventuality happens in future, we should be ready for it. As we are all aware, the healthcare systems and services in India are still in the stage of evolution and are developing. So we have challenges of workforce shortages, absenteeism, poor infrastructure and quality of care, which fortunately we have been able to bridge within a very short time with a concerted effort of the government, both the central and the state, and the various stakeholders who joined hand during this time. With the spread of COVID-19, the hospitals found themselves in a very different situation. They were up against an issue of reorganizing their facilities and activities to face the challenges of health emergency with a response time of not only few days, but sometimes even few hours they had to respond. And hospitals have to transform themselves and their facilities and their wards into intensive, sub-intensive and inpatient areas to accommodate the ever-increasing influx of the patients. And this influx, especially of the serious cases, required immediate increase in the number of beds, in specially equipped wards, intensive care units, besides having a separate routes of entry, exit, and the passages so as to differentiate between COVID and non-COVID areas and have to have dedicated teams in this regard. The administrative and operational challenges in such sudden dire situations are immense and require immediate decisions to be taken, organizational solutions to be shared, and their realization has to be constantly monitored. All this has to be done by administrators continuously and relentlessly because such situations don't go away so easily. We at the JSS Academy of Higher Education Research and JSS Hospital were very much proactive in bringing about this transition and handle the challenges without compromising on the quality of patient care. And I think this is something of which we all can be proud of. And thanks to our dedicated team of healthcare professionals under the blessings of His Holiness Swamiji and the stewardship of Dr. Colonel M. Dayanand, the director of the hospital, all we geared up to these challenging times, and exemplary leadership strategies were worked out at JSS Hospital, supported ably by a plethora of leaders, some of whom we can see on the screen, and some who are not there, like our executive secretary, our pro-chancellor is there, registrars, principals, medical superintendents, doctors, nurses, paramedical staff, each contributing in their own way. And we are aware that there is always, and there will always remain a probability of a disease outbreak with a pathogen which has a pandemic potential and against which no diagnostic, therapeutic or prophylactic countermeasures are available as of now. And under such circumstances, prevention and preparedness are essential, especially for health services, and we should learn from our present experiences and share the best practices for the benefit of the community and the society at large, not for the present, but also for the future. With these words, I wish this webinar a success and extend once again a very warm welcome to today's eminent speaker, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the opening remarks. Now I request Dr. Manjunatha B, Registrar, JSS AHER, to talk about the objectives of the webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Smita. I think this is a very apt seminar which is arranged by Health System Management Studies. As you know, the entire world is in a turmoil and reshaping, reorganizing is the need of the hour. The situation has not brought only crisis, but also amplified the existing risks and created newer ones, leading to newer openings for managing systemic challenges and many ways to build back. At the same time, the crisis has offered many opportunities in spite of the adverse situation. The leadership or the management has, they have got an overall idea what is going on and it has helped them to introspect the existing facilities, how to improve, how to devise strategies to handle the existing resources and future pandemic, how to handle the future challenges in the pandemic in a better and planned manner. The old proverb, united we stand and divided we fall, is very relevant today, whether it is between the people, between the societies, between the states, between the countries. Everywhere this is required in terms of sharing the resources, practices and knowledge. The webinar today by Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, who has served in various capacities, including Ambassador of Greece, is familiar with the present global scenario, and he will be sharing his thoughts and enlightening the participants on the challenges to health systems during this pandemic, along with strategies to tackle them efficiently and effectively. With his experience, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan in the UN and the various sectors such as technology, economic reforms, he is here to share his views on the topic and enlighten all of us. So we are eager to hear to him. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam, for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Kushalappa PA, Director Academics of JSS AHER, to address the participants. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you. Seeking the blessings of His Holiness Swamiji, Chancellor of our university, and paying my respects to a person who we all greatly admire, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, and my salams to the Honorable Pro-Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, and Registrar. First of all, my sincere thanks to Dr. Mamta and her team for giving me this opportunity to share the stage with such luminaries. Well, the COVID pandemic has brought in its wake untold misery with loss of lives, economic downslide, job losses, and a host of psychological issues, which is as important as everything else which has happened, including marital disharmony, child abuse, and the general feeling of insecurity. But at the other end of the spectrum, the pandemic has also made us explore other opportunities for survival. Education carried on with the aid of technology, and students were not deprived of their studies. It also brought families together after a very long time and showed what resilience and grit can do to people in overcoming adversity. Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, a renowned figure and a guiding force to us at JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, has willingly come to educate us on the COVID pandemic, and we are honored, sir. To end, I would like to add, as yet, the best vaccine today is the mask and do gaz duri. With these words, I again extend my heartfelt and grateful thanks to Mamta and the team and giving me this opportunity to be a part of you. And a special hello to my good friend, Dr. Colonel Dayanand. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your talk. Now I request Dr. Shalini, Faculty, Department of Health System Management Studies, to introduce our speaker, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Smita. Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, an Indian diplomat, an ambassador of India, and an author. He is an alumni of Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. He did his MSc from Delhi University and PhD in physics in Stony Brook University, New York. He was taught at Stony Brook University and Punjab University. He has been a diplomat from 1974 to 2007 and serves as an ambassador of India to Greece, Cuba, Haiti, and Dominican Republic. He has worked in Sweden, Syria, Zambia, Austria, and has worked for over 10 years with various UN organizations in Geneva and Vienna, including 3 years as Special Assistant to Director General, UNIDO. He headed the Investment and Technology Promotion Division of Ministry of External Affairs, concerned with promotions of foreign investment and technology flows, economic reforms, energy and transportation, and the communication and vigilance divisions of the ministry. He represented the ministry in several internal ministerial bodies, such as the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, Steering Committee on Biomedical Research, and the Task Force on Information Security. He has been a member of National Security Advisory Board during 2013 to 14. He has been conducting training courses for Indian and foreign diplomats for the Foreign Service Institute of India and has participated as expert on national television programs. Recently, he authored a book titled Technology and International Relations Challenges for the 21st Century. He is an adjunct faculty member at JSS AHER Mysore. He is presently Science Diplomacy Fellow, Research and Information System, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir, and over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I am deeply honored to be actually talking to all of you because you are all in the front line of this battle against COVID. And I feel a bit humbled in the sense that I'm trying to talk to you about a subject in which you are fighting every day with. So I hope you can see the slide. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
So let me go a bit fast on this because I know that time is short. So in fact, much of this is already known to all of you, but perhaps not to all the students. So we are talking about a virus which was first noticed in China, Wuhan, about a year ago in the form of unusual pneumonia. A little while later, they identified the pathogen and sequenced it very rapidly. This is a good thing which happened. And it was called SARS-CoV-2, and it is related to the earlier SARS-CoV-1 virus. And there was a little delay, but after that, the international response kicked in with WHO and so on. We'll come to that later. There was some delays in this response, which proved actually quite critical. So this is the timeline. You will see that there were cases coming in November, December, but it was only by the middle of January that international community really got down to acting. In fact, even the Chinese authorities took it seriously only after about a month and a half. So there were about 45 days of valuable time lost. And this whole reasons for this and how it can, what happened exactly is still the subject of inquiry. Once the community, international community got into action, then I think the response was fairly effective. So now let's see what kind of thing we are dealing with. So this is a part of a group of viruses, a single-strand positive RNA virus that cause diseases in mammals and birds. And they cause respiratory tract infections, sometimes can be lethal. The genome size is fairly large, and the size of the coronavirus varies a lot. And what is characteristic of this form is that it has these club-shaped spikes, proteins which project from the surface. And it's not exactly new. We have had similar coronaviruses which cause common cold symptoms in humans, known for decades. And previously, we had similar cousins of the coronavirus, which had caused the SARS 2003, and then something in Netherlands, and again in Hong Kong. Then you have Middle East in 2013, and then now 2020. So it's not exactly unknown, and it seems to be able to infect humans. So this has implications for the future. This may not be the last time we have this. There may be more such things in the future. And this is what it looks like. It has the spike protein, which everyone talks about, and it's a single strand positive sense RNA. Now, once it started, it spread rapidly from China to Europe, USA, and across the world. Today, we have 75 million cases as we speak, and more than 10 million in India. We've crossed 10 million total cases. And the response from different countries has been uneven. Sweden didn't put any restrictions, which now they are regretting. And some countries imposed extreme lockdowns and restrictions, including ours. And there were, as I mentioned, the delays in adopting control measures allowed the spread beyond the country of origin. By the time control measures were adopted, people have already carried the virus outside the country of origin, that is presently known as China. Now, how does it spread? Well, it spreads through the respiratory route and by inhaling, mostly by inhaling particles from an infected person. And average 1,000 virus particles cause one infection. This may not be true now with the UK mutant strain. This may be more effectively, it seems to be more easily transmitted. Larger droplets fall on the ground, but if they are in the form of aerosol, they can travel longer distances. And you know that air pollution, PM2.5 particles are in abundance, and each PM2.5 particle can be a host for the virus. In Milan, a study has shown that there is a close connection between air pollution and coronavirus incidence. So this has implications for Delhi, which has got very similar climatic conditions to Milan, very cold weather, fog, and high level of pollution. So these, in fact, PM2.5 particles have been known to carry the other viruses for as much as 2 or 3 kilometers. Now, it also depends on how much of PM2.5 you inhale and exhale. Nobody has really studied this. The last such study was done in the context of, surprisingly, Chernobyl, where people began to study what is the amount of radioactive particles which are inhaled and what happens to them after inhalation, and then how much is exhaled. So this goes back long ago. We may have to revisit these studies. So best way to protect, as Dr. Kushalapa said, is the wearing of masks and keeping a distance. So there is a basic reproduction ratio, R0, in epidemiology. For the coronavirus, it's 3 to 5, and much less than measles, which is 12 to 18, but more than flu. And transmission can be from 2 days before developing symptoms to up to 2 weeks after getting the symptoms. So it's a wide time limit during which the disease can be transmitted. So symptoms, I won't go too much into this. Everybody knows this and how to detect it. The main point, one of the concerns is that even after you recover, there can be some longer term damage and longer term effects on the human body, which poses a burden on the healthcare system. Control strategy, those who are looking at the mathematics will look at the SIR model, which is the classic model for epidemics. And the R0 is the basic reproduction ratio. If it comes below 1, the disease dies out. If it's over 1, it spreads until you have herd immunity. That is, a fraction of the population gets or immunized to it. That is the herd immunity. That fraction is related to R0. So the lower you reduce R0, the less the number of people you need to vaccinate. And all the control strategies are embodied in this equation. The C is the number of contacts with susceptible persons. So this can be reduced by avoiding crowds, vaccinating, and of course, achieving herd immunity. I is the probability of infection, which you can reduce by using masks. And T is the time of contact duration. And that means if you isolate the person, then you can reduce T. So everybody can try to work on all aspects of this equation to control this spread of this disease. So the R0 can vary from place to place in the country, from cities and so on. In fact, we have a model in Delhi. The picture on the left shows the R0 of different parts of India. This is very high and so on. And IIT Delhi has a model, a granular model of the disease, in which they can actually predict how the disease will go for the next few days. So they are predicting a downturn in the disease. Compared with other countries, we are not too badly off. Cases per million, we are the lowest among the lowest. And deaths per million population, again, we are more or less the lowest, as these two graphs show. And at present, the active cases continue to decline. We are now going below 4 lakhs. And let's hope we can continue this trend in the future. So now let's come to the main point. There is a huge stress on health systems because of this outbreak. Suddenly you have a flood of cases coming to hospitals, clinics. They don't know how to handle it. Vulnerable groups include the older people and those who have other diseases, lung disorders, heart conditions, diabetes. These people get very seriously affected. What happened in Italy was very, very frightening. People were literally dropping dead, and hospitals had to put patients in the corridors and so on. Now, when advanced countries like Italy and the US in New York, the conditions are like that, you can imagine what would happen in a developing country. So I think the initial pictures actually frightened our policymakers, and they said that we must do our best to avoid as much as possible something like this happening. And hence the prompt action to stop travel and to impose a complete lockdown in March this year. Now, post-recovery, I've mentioned there are health problems, heart, neurological, need for prolonged treatment in ICU. Again, it's a big burden on the healthcare system because looking after somebody in the ICU means it's a very personal intensive. Shortages of all kinds of things, from test kits, ventilators, and whatever therapeutic agents repurposed or otherwise which were there. Shortages of PPE kits, sanitation products and equipment. So now we have developed a PPE industry, which is actually capable now exporting a lot. About 7,000 crores worth of PPE products are being manufactured now from actually zero. We started with practically zero. So in a way, this has been good for us. We have found a new products which we can export. This has resulted in extreme pressures on healthcare and related workers. You will see pictures of nurses, doctors in New York, Italy, literally like heroes, struggling and working long hours. I'm sure it's the case in India and with JSS community also. We still don't know many things about how the disease progresses and what are the sequels, and there's a lot of misinformation about the disease. Social economic impact has been severe. Dr. Kushalapa has talked about the personal impact on families. The industries which depend on travel and physical movement have suffered. Manufacturing, travel, tourism, the restaurant industry, and schools and colleges have had to really severely adjust their whole procedures. Agriculture and IT sector has been spared because agriculture is not involved people crowding together. And fortunately for us, our government did not impose the lockdown on the agricultural sector, which is a good thing. We were able to have as much as possible normal agriculture, except for the marketing and others. And there has been a changeover to remote and online working processes, which I think will probably stay even as a result of even when things get back after the pandemic, because the advantages of remote and online working have become clear in terms of reduced vehicular traffic, pollution, and so on. Now, WHO is the central coordinating agency in the UN system, responsible for health matters. I had the honor to represent India as a delegate to WHO for 3 years, long back. So I have a special place in my heart for the WHO. This time, the WHO has been severely criticized for failure to act quicker. And the US has threatened to withdraw. Actually, now that Biden has come in, that will not happen. For the first time, 12 countries formally asked for Taiwan's participation. But of course, this was rejected in the steering committee of the World Health Assembly. What was there was WHO seemed reluctant to press China for early information. And China also did not give out the information during that window of last 45 days time. That information, if it had been available, things would have been different. But however, since February 2020, WHO has been actively promoting cooperation to fight COVID, coordinating research effort, vaccine, and so on, and training of healthcare workers and so on. The performance of the WHO led to a lot of criticism from member states, led by the US, and the World Health Assembly set up a new panel, International Panel for Pandemic Readiness, IPPR, headed by 2 former prime ministers, to investigate what exactly happened and how we can improve the WHO response to pandemics. There are 2 other committees set up. One is looking at the international health regulations, that why was it that no alert was issued earlier? And then the third one is looking about various WHO processes and matters. Now, the independent panel is supposed to send a team to China to look into the origin of the virus. That has been going on for the last month and a half. But just now, China has agreed to allow this team to come and look into investigation of the origin of the virus. So many people would say that by now it's too late. What will they find out? Anyway, this is the way. India has a fairly active role in WHO now. We are on the executive board till we were the chairman this year, we are, and we'll be a member for the 3-year period. And we have 2 high-level staff members in WHO. One is Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist, at the level of Deputy Director General. And we have Poonam Khetrapal, who is the Regional Director of CRO, WHO Office, again, who is the level of Assistant Director General. So we are actually fairly high profile in WHO, even though we pay less than 1% of the budget. Compared with China's 12% and the US 22%, our contribution is very low. But in terms of expertise and capability, we are big players. So now this pandemic triggered a huge response in research and development aimed at vaccine. And to develop a vaccine, you have to decipher the virus structure, how it interacts with cells, impact on various organs. And then at the same time, you also look at other drugs which could be used, could have an effect, repurposed drugs, HCQ is well known. Then human COVID, plasma extraction and use of antibodies. And these research on how its virus spread is still continuing. Now, of course, there's more interest also in looking at how the air pollution could affect the spread of the virus, both at PM 2.5 and PM 10. Any suspended particulate matter in the air can theoretically carry the virus. The question is for how long and what distance and in what weather. When the weather is very cold, the virus can survive for longer time on these particles. So hence, winter has been, it's a combination of factors which mutually aggravate each other. Winter, fog, air pollution. The cocktail of all these 3 looks like it can be can help spreading much more. Okay, now I come back to international cooperation. As I said, WHO got into the act a little late, but took action. There was adverse impact of US-China rivalry on the whole health system in the world. US blaming China, China defending itself, Europeans taking a middle of the road position. In Europe, there was an uncoordinated response. Even though we have the European Union, different European countries did different strategies, such as Sweden, so on. As far as India is concerned, we have reached out to South Asia and other countries. We have placed our resources at their disposal. Prime Minister has set up a special COVID fund for South Asia. And we have, of course, known as the world supplier of vaccines and a lot of drugs and pharmaceuticals. So we have a potential to be of great help to many other countries. The WHO has coordinated this COVAX initiative with the objective of making available the vaccine to as many people at an affordable cost. So there has been a good sharing of research, and the data has moved through open sources. So it has been a good thing that science has been put more and more on open source platforms in the form of preprints and early information sharing, so that researchers can know much faster what exactly is happening. As I mentioned, India has some strengths, vaccine and drug production. Now we are now producing and exporting a lot of PPE equipment, medical devices, diagnostic devices, ICT, and telemedicine. So these are all our strengths, which can be useful for relieving the pressure on global health systems and also benefiting us economically. So Indian response has been to go in for lockdown with phased easing, masking, insisting at the highest level on masking and social distancing, regulation of international domestic travel. The thing which actually we were not prepared for is the impact on migrant workers. That we did not realize that migrant workers would start going back to their homes. It was probably seen that migrant workers would stay where they are and be looked after. That did not happen. So that was a big problem. They started going back, causing transport problems and all kinds of things. So we have been ramping up research efforts under ICMR and also in diagnostics and protection, stepping up production of materials, protection materials and equipment. We have sent supplies to, I think, more than 100 countries. And we have got economic stimulus measures to restore growth and employment, and special control measures for low-income urban settlements, like Dharavi. It's been mentioned in the international literature as a kind of case study of how in such a difficult environment, control of the disease was fairly effective. In fact, much better than one expected. Prevention and control. Pathogen migration across species now is definitely there. There are many such cases, Ebola, Nipah, so many diseases. So this requires surveillance of diseases among animals as well as humans. And we have to be careful where the two ecosystems interact closely. You have to have an early warning and response system. And what we need for outbreaks is a graded response. Like WHO had the choice of saying either there is a pandemic or not. So the experts didn't want to say, yes, there's a pandemic at the early stage. There was nothing in between. So now WHO says we should have a graded system. That means red alert, yellow alert, blue alert, whatever it is, rather than just a yes, no. So we must have a graded response system to any kind of disease outbreak. We must have ways of rapidly identifying, isolating, and finding the genomic information about the pathogen. And for this, we also need to have good international networks, because the resources of the international community, if they are pooled together, can be much more effective. It also showed up the gaps in the epidemic modeling system. The granularity and local factors were not available in epidemic models, which were actually large-scale epidemic models of the whole population as such. So some work from mathematical epidemiologists. As far as the vaccine scenario in India is concerned, we have a fair number of vaccines in various stages of trials, and some of them are likely to be rolled out quite soon. I won't go into details, but this is there. Once we have a vaccine which is rolled out, I think we will have the capability of supplying many other countries with the same vaccine. The challenge of vaccination is enormous for a country of 1.3 billion. First is that there are 3 A's: availability, that production of the vaccine has to be stepped up, and we also will have an export demand for this vaccine. Fortunately, our factories are already there because our universal immunization program involves a large amount of vaccine production. So the existing facility can be ramped up. Affordability rests on two things. One is how much is the IPR fees we pay to the vaccine inventor. That I think there is an increasing thinking that in this case, the inventor should not be greedy and should actually not charge IPR fees, especially where funding for the research has come from government sources. And of course, support from the form of government subsidy. Access, the distribution and administration of the vaccine is an enormous challenge. We have to avoid disrupting the existing healthcare system while we are vaccinating. In other words, this has to be an additional capacity. Public awareness and cooperation is essential because people get wrong ideas about vaccines and countering misinformation. This has happened even in the advanced countries. So where we are concerned, the average person should not fall victim to misinformation. So this kind of challenges will fare, I think JSS community will be at the forefront of all this effort when it comes through. So what has been done so far? We have a vaccine task force, which is basically for R&D and for trials and so on. And we have a national export committee, which will look into logistics and all the various aspects of delivering the vaccine. The rollout preparations are going on. And if you look at the kind of population involved, the high priority, the frontline health workers, they're about 10 million. And then other frontline workers, 20 million, and people above the age of 50 and with comorbidities, 270 million. These are the three priority groups identified. Cold chain infrastructure needs strengthening, and we have to have additional personnel. What they are trying to do is to use the ANMs to administer the vaccine, but additional people will have to be trained. Communication strategy is very important. And a digital platform called CoWIN has been developed in order to track people who have the vaccine and also which dose vaccine goes to which area and so on. So it will all be in a digital platform. And the government has pledged that everyone who needs to be vaccinated will be vaccinated. So the principles will be that there will be orderly, smooth implementation, no compromise on existing healthcare, and we will use the experience of elections and universal immunization. People's participation will be there. It will not be mandatory. If somebody doesn't want the vaccine, it doesn't have to take it. There will be no compromise on scientific and regulatory norms. So these are the broad principles on which the whole vaccination program is coming out. I spent a little more time on this because this is now going to come in the next few months. Future outlooks and a longer term and steps. More outbreaks are likely. New and emerging diseases from zoonotic origin are certain to happen. We must have an integrated approach to biorisks, taking plants, humans, and animals into consideration, because the disease seems to move across species. Need to improve national and international surveillance and response. That's definitely there. International response and national response both need to be strengthened and improved. A better communication, sharing of data, and mobilization of resources. It was very clear that Chinese were not willing to share data and information at the earlier stage, which could have alerted people. Faster response and control measures required in containing the outbreak, a graded system of response to biorisks, and avoid unnecessary socio-economic disruptions. Now, we in India were using the old outdated Epidemic Act of, I think, 1890s. Old legislation, National Disaster Act. So we didn't have a proper legislation to use for dealing with virus. So now it is time to have a proper legislation to handle biorisks, including pandemics. Now, every biorisk doesn't become a pandemic, but if you neglect a biorisk, it can turn into a pandemic. So we need to have a national biorisk management agency and a proper legislation. Many countries are having in the same boat. Many countries. And we looked at studies of about 7 or 8 countries, and almost everybody in the same boat. They don't have up-to-date legislation and they don't have a proper biorisk management system. We can also promote multi-stakeholder associations for biorisk management involving industry, academia, and all stakeholders. This is very valuable because in the American system, the associations provide a lot of best practices and guidelines which can be shared across the industry. And we come to a thing which is now a looming threat, bioterrorism. Technology has advanced, can synthesize, sequence genomes rapidly, and you can edit genomes with precision. So now you can modify bacteria and viruses to make them more dangerous. And this increases the possible threats to humans, animals, and plants, where normal, natural pathogens and modified pathogens can be used. So we need to think of adequate control measures from purchasers and suppliers of sensitive materials and equipment. Somebody orders a certain DNA sequence or RNA sequence, they should be properly registered and even a KYC kind of thing done. So this kind of control measures are required now, because otherwise these things can go into the hands of malign actors and we can end up with a serious problem. The Biological Weapons Convention is a very weak one. Many countries have joined it, but we need to strengthen it, because in those days, nobody thought of bioterrorism. Now we have to think of it. We have to have an additional protocol to strengthen it, to deal with all these, like the chemical weapons. And we have a review conference in November 2021 of the Biological Weapons Convention. It is hoped that member states will agree on tighter controls and tougher measures. Thank you. I will stop here and we go for the questions. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your interesting and informative session. I request the attendees to post their questions, if any, in the Q&A box so that it can be taken for the discussion. Sir, I think we have 3 questions put up in the Q&A box by Geer M. Ishaq. The first question, where a question is asked, please throw some light on the new coronavirus strain detected in UK. How dangerous it is? Can it lead to a new wave of infection worldwide, and will uproot it?
Okay. Yeah, this is actually in today's newspaper headlines, and it's in London and Southeast England. They have found a new strain which seems to be spreading more rapidly. But at the moment, it looks like it is not, it looks like it does not have much change in the spike protein. Everybody is now looking at the nature of that new strain, whether the spike protein is different from what has been there, because most of the vaccine strategy is targeting the spike protein. So the initial hunch is that it will not affect the vaccines, but certainly this one seems to be spreading more rapidly. Perhaps it has a longer life in the environment. Maybe that is the reason why it's spreading. So it's still too early, but I think the top lab in the UK, Porton Down, is looking at it. They are the top lab in the world on this subject. I think 1 cases have been found in Australia, Denmark, and Netherlands. So European countries have started isolating the UK. Travelers and even movement of goods from the UK has been sort of halted. They are looking at it. It's a bad time for it to happen. As I said, Christmas, fog, pollution in many of the European cities. It anyway is a bad time. You will recall that the virus started spreading a year ago like that. So let us hope that it is not radically different from the existing strain. This is bound to happen because the virus multiplies in human. There is a process of natural selection. The viruses which are more rapid can spread more rapidly. They tend to proliferate more. So natural selection will work in favor of making the virus spread more and probably last longer. Those virus mutants which can survive for longer and can infect more people will survive. So this is a fact. Yeah. The longer the virus remains among the human beings, the more the possibilities of mutation. So it's in our interest to get this infected number of people down as quickly as possible through vaccination, whatever measures. Yeah. Any next question?
Thank you, sir. Yes. Is remodeling or repurposing of drugs will be really helpful in future pandemics also?
Yes, indeed. Because in this case, what happened was the number of drugs which were already approved were found to be useful. So, including dexamethasone. So, I think we have a rich repository of available drugs, and every time a new disease comes, we should look at them and see whether any of them can be effective either for treating or for management of the case. So there's a rich scope there. Use of artificial intelligence will probably simplify and speed up the whole selection process, because I believe there are now artificial intelligence methods by which you can screen a huge number of molecules and identify some with a desirable trait, and you can have a shortcut to finding in a repurposed drug. So that's a good, it will continue to be a good source. Yeah, over to you.
Thanks, sir. We have two more questions. How can an individual put in all his hopes on a vaccine manufactured and supplied when there are multiple strains of virus coming into light?
Yes. Well, this is why I said a lot depends on the strain of the virus and whether the spike protein. Now, what has happened is, in this case, the spike protein has a particular affinity for the ACE receptor part of the human cell. And that seems to be the main factor which is responsible for the infection of humans. So the link between the spike protein and the ACE receptor is crucial. So long as that doesn't change. Now, if that changes, then probably the virus won't infect so much. So whatever is happening, if the virus is still following that path of infection, it means that the mutation is of some other part of the virus. You see? So I think that the approach for targeting this particular mechanism of infection is sound. And I think unless there's a drastic different type of spike protein which works totally differently, the vaccines should be effective. But now we have the technology. Even if you have a totally new pathogen, the time required, first of all, we sequence it very rapidly. That means run it through all kinds of computer and AI and look at the interaction between that new pathogen and the human cell. The whole technology has moved so far ahead that using all kinds of tools that we can now work towards identifying a particular approach for a vaccine and then converting into messenger RNA. So that, that whole process has been short-circuited, totally short-circuited. So as far as individuals are concerned, I think you should not worry about the point about the vaccine. If you take the vaccine and you observe reasonable precautions, over a period of months, this pandemic should come under control. Thank you.
So moving on to the last question. Oh, we have another question. Okay. Dr. Neeraj asks, sir, I want to know that what is the reason for the spreading of coronavirus in Britain again? Is any possibilities in India?
Yes, the answer is yes to the second part. It can spread in India. Whatever happened in London and Southeast England, the new strain is capable of spreading more rapidly, infecting more people. So this can happen. And that is why everybody is now worried in Europe. They're trying to control it. They're taking action to limit it going out of Europe. But to me, it looks like it may have already gone out of Europe. So we should be prepared to have it here, definitely. I mean, we should have our plans ready to fight it if that strain comes. And if it comes into our country with densely populated areas like cities and slums, it could be a problem. That also makes it necessary to unroll the vaccination as quickly as possible. So, so that will also help in control. So we should be prepared and alert. Thank you.
So one last question. Which is the new AI technology which helped more for this pandemic condition, COVID-19?
Well, I am not an expert in AI, but I think AI was used to screen a lot of repurposed drugs. Molecules, to identify candidate molecules which could possibly have an effect on the coronavirus. So that is one aspect. The other thing which has happened very recently is that DeepMind, Microsoft DeepMind has come up with an artificial intelligence application called AlphaFold. Now, AlphaFold, for the first time, has been able to calculate with extreme accuracy how a protein will fold in exact shape of a protein. Because we knew that the protein consists of certain amino acid sequences, but we didn't know how it folds. Now, the way in which a protein folds is critical in determining how it behaves in the body. So AlphaFold now enables you to calculate this. And they are extremely optimistic that using this tool, they will be able to design proteins for various purposes for the human. So this is a huge advance. I think it's a 60-year challenge which AlphaFold has been able to solve. So things like this are happening. AI was used to scan X-rays to determine conditions. Now, I think the Israelis came up with some application using AI to determine whether somebody's got COVID, early diagnosis and so on. So it's remarkable. Even dogs, apparently dogs are able to smell out people who have COVID. So AI is definitely got a huge number of applications in medicine and health, definitely. Okay.
Thank you, sir. But I see some kind of statement by Dr. Neeraj where he's talking strains differ from previous on infection. In continuation with the above question, I think the question could have been more clearer to be answered.
Yeah, I must say that, look, the UK virus, this whole work on the virus is still very much ongoing. I think what is done by the Europeans is a precaution. And I think we would be wise to follow similar precautions. As we have a lot of people moving between UK and India, we should be alert and try to, until we know more about this new strain, in fact, have the exact DNA sequence, RNA sequence, and actually have the morphology very clear, and to see how, if at all, it differs from the other strains and what makes it more infective. We should, in the meantime, while all these questions are being looked at, we should be careful. Thank you.
Ashish Wadhwani asked, will the prepared vaccine work for the new strain of virus? Maybe the spike and strain of new virus would have changed.
At the moment, we don't know. I think the present view among the scientists in the UK is that the vaccine will still work. This virus is simply more transmissible for whatever reason, but not that much different. Yeah.
I have a question, Dr. Bhaskar.
Yes, Dr. Suresh. Yes.
Yeah. See, since you are been in the field of diplomacy and travel across the world in various official capacities, and now working on science diplomacy, I would like to really get from you or understand from you, like how the world is going to respond now in the issues relating to science cooperation. Like earlier, there was always this IPR coming in between, and profiteering and other things were on mind of the people. And now we found for the first time the government chipping in money, the private sector putting in money, and all working together to a single objective. Will this type of approach help us in future also for developing antibiotics and other things, or it's going to be again IPR driven and competitive and profiteering as the objective?
No, I think this time there's been a radical change, and this model will probably continue, because what has happened this time, the research into vaccines has been funded not just by the private sector. The governments have put in a lot of money into this. Now, when the government funds research, then the company which makes the discovery cannot claim that they have to recoup all their money. If they are using government grants and government support, then they have a moral obligation not to charge for the IPR at the level at which they would have otherwise charged, because they argue that IPR is a way of recovering our costs and making a decent profit. So that will probably now change. And when it comes to a pandemic and a disease like this, I think no company will like to appear to be greedy and profiteering. And in this case, there's a good thing that there are many vaccines which are competing. So there's a limit. If it was, for example, if it's a single product made by a single company, then of course you are at their mercy. And there are many such products in healthcare. I mean, where one particular product, for example, a monoclonal antibody for treatment of eye disease, macular degeneration, is only made by this one company, Novartis. And so that price of that drug is enormous. It's so much that even in the US, people can't afford it. So then when you have a single company which has that monopoly, then of course they can charge high. But over a period of time, others will come up with similar product. We have a company in India which is making a biosimilar. If you don't, some of you may know what I'm talking about. It's a drug called Lucentis. It is used for treating AMD injection. It's a fragment of monoclonal antibody, very highly priced. But we have a biosimilar which is being made in Ahmedabad, which is about 1/4 the cost. So over a period of time, people will come out with things like that. So I think the days when a company could adopt predatory pricing are over. Frankly, nobody is going to allow it. And even public opinion, even companies have to follow that.
This throws up one more question based from what answer you gave. With multiple vaccines around, now who will make the decision whether the individual has to take which vaccine he will take, or whether the government is going to drive that this vaccine is better? Who is going to take the responsibility? Because ultimately, if the physician is taking or somebody else is taking a decision, then if it leads to complication today, the liabilities are of different nature than what it was before, because everybody feels that they can make money by even claiming a liability. So the people are tempted towards that rather than really looking at something as help them to live further. So how do you feel?
I think when we have multiple vaccines, what will matter a lot is which vaccines the government uses for its own machinery. And the rest of it, once they're approved by the CDCSO, they will go on the market like any other drug. But what the government uses, that vaccine will probably have, greatest confidence among the public, hopefully. But if somebody wants to take a different vaccine, if somebody wants to take the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, and if it's approved here, then they can do it. And of course, if those who can afford it can always travel to UK or USA and get the vaccine there. I'm sure you will have people trying to bring in the vaccine in their handbag and so on. So that raises a lot of issues. But I think once we have, say, a basket of 5 or 6 vaccines which are approved for use, and if the government decides on a particular 1, 2, 3 vaccines in their program, that itself will be, I think, a big factor.
So I've got one question, keeping the global perspective in mind. Like countries like India, which is developing vaccine, and we've got a huge population ourselves to take care of, and our vaccine, whether it is being produced by 2 or 3 manufacturers, itself will have a huge market within our country before we are in a position to give it to other parts of the world. Similarly, for US also, it has started immunizing its own people in the country itself. So we won't have resources or vaccine stocks to be available sparing for other countries. Similarly, for UK, they have got their own vaccine. What happens to countries like the African countries, or to Latin American countries, or countries in Southeast Asia, other countries, like will they have to wait for a very, very long time to have an access, or is there some global strategy being worked out that their needs are also more or less addressed to simultaneously when countries like India or US has already done it, and other countries, they are in the process of having access to the vaccine. How their access is being ensured? Or is it going to take a long time before their population can have an access to these vaccines?
Yeah, some of these countries, they have already booked in advance some orders of vaccine. But that's mostly the advanced countries. But for the developing countries, the WHO has got this thing called COVAX initiative. Under the COVAX initiative, you put in money into this COVAX fund, and that fund is used to get the vaccines for all the countries who are participating. So what I suspect is that although we will give priority to our own rollout of vaccine, there will be some amount of the production which will be earmarked for export through WHO to other countries. This, I think, even Prime Minister has said we will, and all countries. The Chinese will also do it. The Russians will also do it. It's quite likely. China also has a huge population, so they probably will have to deal with that. Russia can do it because they have a smaller population, and they have already gone into this deployment of this vaccine. So there will be some amount of vaccine which will be available for sharing with other countries, but not at the cost of the domestic program, which will have priority. I said already in the first wave, 30 million plus 270 million have to be vaccinated in India. 30 million is top priority because there are people like you who are working in the front line. 10 million are like that, 20 million are all the other frontline workers. So 30 million must get the vaccine as quickly as possible. Whereas 270 million, they can take more time and some others can share it. In the meantime, we all have to observe, try to cooperate by continuing with masking and reducing and distancing and reducing crowds, so on. So it's uncharted waters ahead.
I understand. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry we have gone over the limit of 7 o'clock.
No problem, sir. I think there were some good questions and
very good questions.
Some questions.
I must thank you all for being here and putting this together, and all the participants for sparing the time to come and listen and ask questions. Thank you
all. Thank you, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, and I think I am expected to summarize and and give concluding remarks. It was indeed great pleasure to hear you once again, Dr. Balakrishnan, because you always give a perspective which we usually don't normally see. You always look at a global perspective and try to give us the insight from there on every issue which we have seen in the past. So I think similarly, you throughout the whole history as how it started and where it went and where we are and what we should be doing next. I think it was all very well covered and provided. Thank you very much. I think our students and audience have benefited. And for those who had not joined in, they will be what you call as recorded and available to them from our website to listen to this talk again. So I think everybody would definitely like to benefit from the words of wisdom that came from you. We have a big challenge ahead of us, not just because of coronavirus alone. Yes, the impact of coronavirus is going to be much larger than we expected because everyone is trying to take decisions based on their own what we call as their own perceptions about what is good for the society, rather than a basis of science or a proven path or taking steps which would be benefiting a larger community. I think they do not look at that perspective. So in this direction, I feel a country like India, which has got vast population and different types of economic distribution and diversity of knowledge and literacy which is there, which is existing at different levels. All these are posing new challenges, and sometimes the country needs to take some decisions even with an iron hand to implement it. Otherwise, it will go haywire. I think this is something which we as the society will have to be conscious of, that somebody has to take the decision, and we have to work with that and see how this decision is moving forward. Let us all hope that the new strain of coronavirus doesn't come and impact us. But even if it does come, I think our country is so well geared with the systems and structures. I think we should not, our response time will be much faster than what it was previous. In fact, in our own JSS hospital, even though the cases have come down, we had taken a conscious decision that we will not taper down our operations level, and we have kept it open so that we will not reduce the workforce or reduce the beds or try to do something else. We are trying to keep the same team alert so that they are on the same level of response time, which should be there, and we should not wait for some government reaction to take place or direction to come. We should move forward. So that is how we are kept prepared. Hopefully the vaccine also would be out in maybe a few weeks' time, and that will bring some hope and direction to us. So once again, I thank you, Dr. Balakrishnan, for the evening, and wish everyone a very happy and prosperous New Year ahead, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, sir, for remarks of the webinar. Dean of the JSS Hospital, Dr. Colonel M. Dayananda sir, was supposed to share his experience during the COVID situation, but due to the technical glitches, he was not able to join us. I think sir has joined the webinar now. Now I request sir to share his experiences during COVID-19 situation. Over to you, sir.
Good evening to all the eminent speakers as well as Dr. Balakrishnan also. Our JSS team at JSS Hospital has been in the forefront for the whole district as a whole in the Mysore district. And my team did a human service, and we still continue to do so. As for the preparations for the vaccine to come and how to distribute firstly to the frontline workers, later to the greater community, we have started deliberations, we have made teams, we have trained a group of combined people, that is the clinician, the nurses and other people, and how to do this inoculation in batches in the hospital, where to store the vaccine has all been worked out, and we are ready to take that challenge too. But since this webinar is also about the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the healthcare systems, Dr. Balakrishnan has covered in a very short period everything in a whole gamut of issues that is there. But I just wanted to highlight other issues that is going to come up. There are three issues that is going to come up. One is that our universal immunization has gone down in the last 8 to 9 months, which was a very regular affair to look after our children and the future citizens. That has gone down to a great extent. And second issue is about the detection and reporting of the tuberculosis has gone down. Treatment as well as detection of cancer has gone down. And almost 10 to 15 million people have gone down from the regular affordable level to the BPL level in this duration of 8 to 9 months. So this has been the adverse effect of COVID-19 on our country. And just make 1 or 2 points about the country as a whole and how we are moving towards it. Even now, we are doing patch up as fragmented job, and we are not addressing the issue in terms of resources that is to be allocated to the health sector. Even now, we are just paying 2% of our GDP, which for 100 years to come will not be able to catch up with advanced countries. We need to invest more in healthcare sector. Second is collaboration between the government and private agencies. 70% of the multi-specialty care is with the private agencies. Government need to collaborate and strengthen their arms and this thing to do public health and support the people rather than coercive measures using old Epidemic Act and Emergency Act and things like that. It's very poor management by the government as of now, but they need to collaborate with the private agencies, how to use the private agencies and bring the healthcare to everyone, affordable or not affordable. It should be the focus rather than coercive measures to say, we'll close the hospital if you're not giving this kind of beds and all. It's a very poor strategy that government adopted this time. I'm sure it should be rectified and take private agencies, private sector also as your partner and move ahead. And again, I thank the Professor Balakrishnan, Dr. Balakrishnan, as well as our team who gave a perspective to the challenges that is ahead. And I'm sure with the new year coming, we'll overcome this and we'll come back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your talk. Now I request Dr. Divya, Faculty, Department of Health System Management Studies, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, madam.
You have to unmute, Divya.
Thank you, Mrs. Smita. Gratitude can transform common days into thanksgiving and turn routine jobs into joy, and can change ordinary opportunities into blessings. Thank you is the best prayer that anyone could say, and I say that one a lot. Thank you expresses extreme gratitude, humility, and understanding. It is indeed my proud privilege to be proposing the vote of thanks today. It was our pleasure to have amidst us Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, adjunct faculty of JSSA HER family, a diplomat, an ambassador, and also has served with various UN organizations. Sir has recently authored a book titled Technology and International Relations, Challenges for the 21st Century. Sir, who is very busy and despite his busy schedule, consented to share his views on COVID-19 and challenges to the healthcare systems. Sir has enlightened us on the various challenges that the healthcare system is facing in the current COVID-19 scenario and the way ahead. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence today. Great leaders don't set out to be leaders. They set out to make a difference. It is never about the role, but always about the goal. We have one such great leader in our beloved Pro-Chancellor, Dr. B. Suresh, who has supported us in all our activities and endeavors. Thank you, sir, for all your support that you have given us across the years that the department has flourished. Thank you once again, sir. Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surinder Singh, is a dynamic person who believes that all this can be done. We humbly thank you, sir, for your constant support in all our activities. Thank you, sir. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. We immensely thank Dr. B. Manjunatha, Registrar, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, and Dr. P.A. Kushalappa, Director Academics, for being the pillars of strength and support in all our activities that we have carried out. And they have also rendered us support in making this event successful. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kushalappa, sir. Thank you, Manjunatha, sir. We have amongst us a person of great vision, who is the Director of JSS Hospital, Dr. Colonel M. Dayananda, is also the Dean, Department of Health System Management Studies, who has rendered support for all the departmental activities. And thank you for being a part of this event also, sir. Thank you very much, sir. We thank all the principals of the constituent colleges as well as the staff of these institutions in participating in today's webinar. We also thank the officers of the university for supporting us in all our activities. Thank you all. Special thanks to Dr. Dakshayani MR, Deputy Director Authorities, and Dr. Prashant, Assistant Director Academics, for the effort that they have put in for all the activities of our department. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Dr. Prashant. We thank the technical team, the IT department of JSSA HER, for the work that they have put in to make this event a successful one. They have organized a lot of webinars across this phase and put up a wonderful show. Thank you for all the support, the IT team that you have rendered to us. Thank you once again. I profoundly thank Dr. Mamta HK, Associate Professor and Coordinator of Department of Health System Management Studies, for being a pillar of strength in all the activities and leading the department forward. Thank you, madam. I would be failing in my duty if I do not mention my colleagues, Dr. Shalini, Mrs. Smita, Dr. Sujay, Mr. Roshan, Mrs. Kanakavalli, and Mr. Harshit, who have contributed for all the activities as well as in planning and carrying out the responsibilities for this webinar. A special thanks to Mr. Pratap, Mr. Yogesh, our office staff, for putting their best foot forward and completing the tasks that were allocated to them. No program is complete without having a great audience. We are deeply appreciative to have you people as an amazing audience for this webinar. A special thanks to the learners from JSSA HER Africa, as well as students of Department of Health System Management Studies and all the students of JSSA HER for putting your enthusiasm to learn and participate in all the activities carried out by our JSSA HER family, as well as the webinar today. Thank you for participating and making this event a grand success. Once again, on behalf of the department, we would like to wish all of you all a Merry Christmas and a very happy and prosperous 2021. Once again, thank you from all of us here.
Thank you.
We thank Dr. Divya also. And thank you, sir, for all your support.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you, and
inspiring
stay
us
safe.
to do better
Stay
and
safe,
better.
everyone. God bless you all. Swamiji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.